Welcome back to another episode of the Upgrade My Classroom podcast. My name is Kevin McKella, the host, and this is the show where we teach proactive mental health and personal development strategies for teens. So educators, administrators, guidance counselors, social workers, whoever can listen to the show, make an upgrade in their classroom and community and school district by teaching SEL frameworks, mental health tactics, and everything and anything in between. Today, I'm super excited because I have on a guest. I haven't had a guest on in quite some time, and I think we were kind of taking all that energy and letting it boil up for a fantastic guest, and her name is Erin Pompa. And Erin is a fellow youth speaker. We kind of run in some tight circles here, and I've been wanting to actually chat with her and chop it up for like literally almost 6 months now, and we finally made it happen. And I was so glad we did, because Erin's story is fascinating because it is almost exactly the route and trajectory that my story has taken, except you substitute music for dance. Erin is a fantastic dancer, and she's a dance educator, and now she's a full-time youth speaker. So we really unpacked some of the struggles that not only young teens are dealing with, but young performing artist teens, and some of the unique mental health challenges that they were facing, as well as some of the challenges that we face ourselves as performers, let alone teachers. So we had such a fantastic conversation. As a New Jersey native, Erin has dedicated over 20 years to the field of education, earning a master's degree in dance education from NYU. She served as the dance director at Rosa Park School of Fine and Performing Arts for 14 years and was an adjunct professor at Berkeley College, where she taught the art of creativity. Erin's experience in the arts, education, performance, and curriculum design uniquely positions her to deliver impactful and inspirational presentations to youth. Her focus areas include mental health awareness, substance abuse prevention, and leadership development. Beyond her work in schools, Erin is a sought-after speaker at youth conferences, colleges, and dance studios. So without further ado, let's get into my conversation with Erin Pompa. Erin, thank you so much for finally being on the show. How are you?
Kevin, thank you. It's been a long time coming, right? But we're here when we're supposed to be. I'm so happy to be here.
I love it. That is a very, very awesome line. So yeah, we've rescheduled a few times. Really appreciate you jumping on. And I think the biggest, most interesting thing I wanted to have this conversation with you about is our stories. Because literally, if you substitute music for dance, you get Erin. Like, it's so crazy how our backgrounds are so identical, yet so unique. So I want to hear from you. Please tell us and tell the listeners who you are, Erin. Give us the scoop and tell us the trajectory of where you started professionally and now what you're doing.
Yeah, well, I'm an imperfect human trying to figure out how to live with integrity and dignity and grace. So that's who I am in a nutshell. And I make a lot of mistakes along the way, but I pick myself back up. And I try to get centered and I keep trying to move forward. And I guess that's like the basis of my story, like a good archway. I grew up in the hood in New Jersey. I grew up in Patterson, but my husband always laughs. He's like, stop claiming the hood. You grew up on the really nice side of the hood. And I'm like, fine, whatever. But I'm going early because this is where the story starts. There was a performing arts high school in my town that was the safest because the other schools were subjected to gang violence. So my mom put me in dance at the age of 3 to prepare me to go to that school. So I went to a performing arts high school where I studied dance with my academics. So that's how dance was ingrained in me. And when it was time to go to college, my parents were like, what do you want to go to college for? I'm like, I'm not going unless I could go for dance. So I went to school in New York City, and this is kind of where my mental health own journey took off. I put a lot of pressure on myself. I wasn't the best dancer, was very critical of my weight, really resisted the program because I didn't feel good enough. So I transferred to Montclair State in New Jersey, where I soared because it was a small learning community. And I share that to say, as an educator, always an educator and just a student, sometimes you just need another environment to thrive, and that's okay. And that's something that I tried to instill in my students, because I know they put pressure on themselves to go to certain colleges or to get into certain places. And it's like, no, just because you get into big glowing college doesn't mean it's the right fit for you. So then, I tried to be a dancer. I live right near New York City, and I was doing that grind, and I quickly realized, wait, number one, I don't want to be on Broadway. And number two, I can't sing, nor do I think I will ever be able to sing at a caliber to be able to make it on Broadway, because you need both skills, singing and dancing, at least, to be on Broadway. So I fell in love with concert dance. And if anybody doesn't know that, that's more like contemporary and modern. So I did a little of that, but not on a huge scale. And then my parents said, you need a job. You're a starving artist. We're tired. We're tired of supporting you. So the job at the high school that I graduated from opened up, and I was the dance teaching job. I'm like, no, I don't want to be a teacher. I want to be a star. Like, ew, kids, I can't stand them. Like any pedagogy class in college, I was like, no, why am I here? Let me tell you, Kevin, I walk into there that first day and I fall in love with them. I fall in love. And I have never loved, I loved performing as an artist, like when you're in your zone taking class or creating. I never thought that I could get that love from teaching somebody else how to do it and watching them do it. And I experienced that with my students. And fast forward, I spent 14 years there and I absolutely loved it. And at year 10, I said to myself, what else do I want to do? They were coming out to change. They were changed and coming out to take class. I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I had this big, uncomfortable emotional experience because number one, my whole entire life was dance. Number two, I love these kids and I felt like it was my vocation. It was my vocation. I didn't know that my vocation was allowed to change. I didn't understand that. So I felt very lost. So I stayed there for 4 more years and I grew another business helping dance educators bring their areas of specialty online during the pandemic. And I had a moment where I'm like, okay, this isn't my calling. And my husband was like, and that afforded me with being married. And I like to be very transparent with people, because people are like, yeah, I left my job. No, let me tell you something. I could not leave my job unless my husband was here with me. I make enough to support myself as a speaker, but the only reason that I can do that without a full-time job is because of what my husband and I do together, because I don't want to give people false hope, because you see that a lot, right? So anyway, I left my job because that business was in a place where it was giving me the income I needed. And then when I said this business isn't for me, I had to go back to substitute teaching and my ego was bruised. I have a master's degree. I have a master's degree from NYU in dance education. This is what my ego tells me, right? My ego tells me I'm so great and I'm so above subbing. No, I went back to subbing and I didn't like it. I'm going to be honest with you, because for subbing, I felt like, you didn't get to get the same relationship with the students. I was like a placeholder. It didn't feel good. And then I was like, okay, I want to be a speaker. And I went on a long journey of doing that. And when they said, what do you want to, who's they, like the gods, when it was time to figure out what I wanted to speak about, I told myself, I have to speak to women. I have to speak to everybody. And I'm a person of faith. My higher power was like, I need you with these kids. I need you back with these kids. And what do you want to speak about? I have things that I faced in my life and mental health and other things. And I found that was my message. And I was like, okay, let's do this. And then I started aligning with the right people, finding the right podcasts, doing the next right thing. And here I am today. I am a full-time speaker since April, and I'm very happy.
Congratulations. That is such an awesome trajectory and journey. I just literally it's so similar to my story, and I'm not going to go down my road. I mean, but I do want to unpack a couple things here. So interesting that your first exposure to dance was when you were 3 because your parents knew they wanted to send you to a better school, and in order to do that, you needed that skill set of dance. Now, that was a performing arts. You said a performing arts high school.
Yeah, so it could have been a skill set of anything in the performing or commercial, commercial art and stuff, but dance is where they put me.
Here's the question. Maybe someone has asked you before, if you thought about it before. What if they chose something else, say music, say anything? What do you think would have happened?
Well, I think I'm a creative at my core, right? As you start to evolve in your art form and mature in it, I think I appreciate all types of art, but something that I would want to dedicate my life to is only dance. And if they didn't put me in that, I can't even ask that question. That's a scary question, Kevin.
Right.
Like, that has been the foundation of my entire life.
And not to start questioning your entire life, but it's really interesting because it's so much. So my mother, when I was in fifth grade, my mother said something to me, and I'll never forget it. She said, "You know what?" We were talking about my fifth grade teacher, Mr. Julian. Mr. Julian's such a nice guy. He's you're so lucky you have him as a teacher. I see so much of you in Mr. Julian. You would make a great teacher, Kevin. And it's very interesting, right? Because like we think about our experience going through the world and how much of our lives and our decisions might possibly be influenced, but not necessarily. I mean, you could also look at that as that everything happens for a reason. Like it's totally subjective of however you want to view it. That's the most beautiful thing. It's just a very interesting conversation, right? Because it's such a art. And my thing that I speak to kids about is decision. So it's like every decision we make just sends us down a different trajectory, or was everything mapped out for us anyway? So like, right. So very interesting, just kind of poking at that a little bit. Let's talk about your going through, you said you were majored in dance in Manhattan.
Yeah, I went to Marymount Manhattan College my first year, and that was a total. And then I went to fail. I put the thumbs down for those who are just listening and not seeing. And then I graduated from Montclair State with my undergrad and NYU with my master's in dance.
Right.
Education.
Okay. Gotcha. And you said the first, say it again, where was it?
Marymount Manhattan College.
Marymount Manhattan College. Okay. Why? Talk to me a little bit about that. Why was that so hard for you? Was it just unpack that a little bit if you don't mind?
So I grew up in the inner city, which is a predominantly Black and Spanish neighborhood. I was born in 1980. So by the time I went to college, it was the 90s. So at that time, even now, like, I don't know now, but throughout my dance career, I would say anytime I was outside of Patterson training, I was one, if not the only person of color. Looking back, like I was very open. My parents exposed me to a lot as a child. So I was open to different cultures and different races. But when that is what becomes your home, it becomes hard to adjust. So one, I wasn't technically proficient. Like the performing arts high school that I went to, the teacher that was there, she didn't teach me at the caliber that these students were taught.
Sure.
That's bottom line.
Yep.
And number two, I was one of the maybe few people of color. My body's different. I'm not technically proficient. And then I'm just like, do I even belong here? And then I started to go down a road of like self-destruction because I'm like, hey, if this isn't going to work, I'll do other things to keep myself occupied. I didn't understand so much about the world and myself at that time.
No one does. You're 18. No one does.
Yeah. 17.
No one has a clue of what they're doing, right? Like that's the craziest thing. And that's another thing that I think we can unpack in a minute, why teens are so much more challenged than say even you and I were. I mean, I was born in 87, so I'm a little bit, I cannot believe you were born in 1980. That's incredible. You look younger than I am. So but it is true because now teens are even dealing with so much more stress because the simple decision of going to college, I mean, it was a big decision when we were thinking about it. But now if they choose the wrong major and spend a year going down that road, they've just wasted thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars potentially, and something doesn't transfer. So it's so much more of a challenge. So let's dig into that then. Let's talk a little bit about some of the things that you're seeing in general. Let's talk about general high school students. So you do these gigs and you do these talks, and we obviously have mutual friends. I was just hanging out with Brittany Richmond, another fellow youth speaker, at a program that you spoke at about a year ago. So like it's very well connected. With that being said, we see these things and we get to have these conversations with students after we speak, right?
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you're seeing and hearing that these students resonate with and that they're dealing with when it comes to either their mental health or personal problems or school problems? What are the students dealing with in 2024?
Well, my talk that I usually give at teen conferences, summits, all those things is navigating your negative thoughts. So normalizing the idea that negative thoughts happen. So number one, a lot of these students are like, I didn't know that everybody felt this way, even though they knew subconsciously that everybody felt that way. When we start to normalize it and call it out, they see it and they're like, wow. And so definitely like the thought process, like the I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy enough, or the fact that they're letting their circumstances dictate how they live their life, and also seeing their self-worth in outside stimulus. And I don't really think that changed since I was in high school or since the kids I taught in high school. But now I think that we are having more conversations about mental health, and it's more out in the open. So we see it. It's like it's open. Before it was closed because nobody talked about it when I was there. When I was with my students, I didn't have the vocabulary to understand what it was. But now, yeah, that's what the students are saying. They're like, yeah, thank you. I was in so much pain. I didn't know anybody felt this way. Or they tell me like everybody is going through something. Everybody is going through something. So I think the thing that they say the most is like their thinking and how they perceive themselves in relationship to what they have been through, or in relationship to what they're seeing out in the world on social media and all those things.
That's very, I mean, that's very similar to what I'm experiencing and what I'm hearing. It's also very similar to what I've experienced as a young adult as well. I put so much of my self-worth, and maybe this goes the same for you, Erin, into my professional I want to say career or my profession, because when I was going through college, like it was always, I was training to be a music teacher. That was the paper. But then I also had this thing of, I'm a musician. So when I do my junior recital, my senior recital, like when I, have that solo at the concert, like that is now, I always subconsciously viewed that as, this is my self-worth on display for the whole world right now. And
Yes.
if I don't perform even in the realm of acceptability of that I consider what is acceptable, then I'm a bad person. Like I haven't practiced enough, or my stage fright got to me, or whatever, something, my inner thoughts, whatever, but I shouldn't be doing this. Can you as a dancer resonate to that at all?
Yes, I think that was like the breeding ground for my mental self-destruction. Leotards, mirrors, race in like all of it. Food, like how I look, how my body moves, what gigs I get, where I get casted, how I perform, does my role change? Like all of it is based, my self-worth was based on what my body was doing and how I was able to emote movement and how I looked. It was a lot.
So with that being said, take us through, and if it's an ongoing process, that's great, because even it is for me a little bit. I moved so much more past that. But what are some of the things that you've done to separate yourself from your self-worth, connecting to your craft, and even now as a speaker, right? Whatever craft it may be, dancing, speaking. How have you worked to, talking specifically for you, move past and disconnect your self-worth from that?
Okay, so there's number one, I think, is age and experience.
Sure.
The more you experience life with an open mind and are a student of life and a student of ways to, I guess, for lack of better words, heal, the better you will be, right? But that doesn't mean without age, you can't still get there. So let's take age out of the equation for our youth. So something that I teach and that I practice, like I practice this, it's having a perspective shift. How I see the world, other people needs to shift. Because before it was people are doing things to me, I didn't get that, they're bad, this happened, they don't like me, I'm not worthy. My perspective is off. So it's shifting the way you see things. And how do I teach people to do that? And how do I do it? Listen, there's a lot that I do. I go to therapy. I have a network of people, I like to keep it very simple as a starting. Practice acceptance. Like, you're not always going to be the best. You're not always going to get what you want. You're going to fail, but that doesn't take away from your value. And I dive into that deeper, right? And then it's practicing acceptance and gratitude, being grateful. Like I have the example, like my dad has Parkinson's and I hate it. And I was very angry when he was diagnosed with Parkinson's. It might be 20, 25 years, 20, 15 years ago by now. And I remember that being so angry at the Parkinson's took away from my relationship with my father, because I was so focused on the anger that when I was with him, I was just not even with him. So I realized something had to shift. I had to practice gratitude. And I explained to the kids, and I use different stories depending on who I'm speaking to. But like, okay, my dad has Parkinson's, but he's still here. My dad has Parkinson's, but he's mentally with it. He has Parkinson's, but he has medicine. That doesn't make my father's Parkinson's go away, but it makes my perspective shift around the Parkinson's, and in turn makes me be able to live with it in a more peaceful way. So the goal is not to make your problems go away, or to like be like, have this false gratitude, like everything's great, I'm so happy, the world is great. No, it's about looking at this hard situations you have and finding the gratitude in it and being grateful for what you can. It makes you live an easier, softer life. And the other one is being of service. And when I talk about being of service, is being kind, saying hi to the next person. When I talk to the students, I say, how many of you go down the hallway, see somebody with their head down, and you tap them and say, are you okay? Nobody ever did that to me in high school. People saw me, I was in pain, but I was also a high achiever, so I could camouflage it. But there were definitely moments when people were able to see me not at my best. And even my friends didn't do that. That's being of service. That helps you shift your perspective, because we are selfish people. Like, I think about me all the time. So when I stop thinking about me and put my focus on someone else, it shifts my perspective about how I view the world. So that's a really big overarching like picture of what I think.
I'm going to just take one more shovel dig a little bit deeper with this, because this is great. By the way, being selfish is 100%. I agree, because it's human nature. We're trying, where our primitive brain is still trying to survive and find food and shelter, and we haven't realized that we've moved on from that. So I totally understand when you come the space you come from when you say selfish. It's a matter of survival. It's not like, look how great I am. Now sometimes we can go down that road too, but I think I think you're totally right. I'm just curious if you have, and if not, no worries, but I'm curious if there is anything that is a tactical thing to produce both acceptance and or gratitude on a daily basis. Because it's one thing to say that, and that's exactly, I agree. It's one thing to say we need to change our perspective and look at what we're grateful for, and look at the fact that this is accepting the negative and kind of letting that sit on this side over here, right? This is what's happening, and I don't have to, this will stay here. Is there anything specifically? Is there a journaling prompt? Is there a little sticky note thing? Is there a mantra?
Okay.
What is there a tactic behind that?
Okay, so I'll show you. Let me get a pen.
Oh, I'm excited.
And let me see if I have any paper here. And this is an activity, and I got this activity off of YouTube, and kids love it. And I asked the person on the YouTube video if I could use it, and I use it in my keynote and my presentations. So if you don't, is this on YouTube too, Kevin?
Yes.
So if you're not watching, I will do my best
on YouTube
to talk you through it.
No, it's their job. They got to subscribe on YouTube. That's it.
I asked the students or the youth, what do you see when you look at this? And Kevin, what do you think most say?
It's a dot.
Right. So right now in front of Kevin, I'm holding a piece of white paper with a black dot in the middle, right? A black dot. And I say to them, as life happens, and circumstances happen, you could start to focus only on the black dot, what you don't have, what's missing in your life. I didn't get into the college of my dreams, black dot. I didn't get the boyfriend, the girlfriend, partner I wanted, black dot. My parent is ill, black dot. I didn't, I can't, I won't, black dot, black dot, black dot. Your world gets smaller, and that's what you start to see. But what about the white space around the black dot, right? Okay, you don't get into the college of your dreams, but you have money to go to college. Okay, your parent is ill, but you're of sound mind and body and can be there with them. Okay, you didn't get the boyfriend, the girlfriend, the partner you want, but you have friends who love you. That's the white space, seeing what you have in the midst of them not getting what you want. So this black dot can make your life really small. I'm not telling you that these things don't exist, but we're going to work on how to find your white space. And then I would take them on an activity of write down one thing in your life that's a black dot for you. And then they would write it down. And then I would say, write down all of the negative thoughts that are coming up from that black dot. I'm not. So the black dots, one person said once, I'm not smart enough. Or my parents are going to be mad at me because I'm not good enough in school. That's their black dot. And then what were the negative thoughts? I'm stupid. I'm not good enough. I'm a failure. And then we go through this exercise sometimes of validating or unvalidating the negative thought. And I say, write true or false next to the negative thought. It can only be true if you have data to prove it. So I'm not smart enough. Well, where's your data? Well, my parents, and one student said, and it was so good. And like, it was good because it challenged me. In my culture, you have to have straight A's to be good enough, but I have some B's. And then we had to talk about the idea of value and who places the value and work ethic and if you're doing your best. So it's like trying to counter those negative thoughts. And then we write down, and then I tell them to write down, what do you need to accept about that black dot situation? Well, if it's with the grade, I'm doing the best that I can. Or I'm really okay with getting B's and I don't want to push myself to get an A. All right, then accept it. And we break it down even further, what's in your control and what's not in your control, right? I'm in control of how I study. I'm not in control of the final grade I get. Like, you're not. And then we talk about, okay, what are you grateful for in spite of that? Well, I'm grateful that I actually can go to school. So that's what we do. So I take them on that whole journey in about an hour.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and it's great because they share and they talk about it, and then it normalizes. And the reason I like the dialogue is because then it starts to normalize. Like, kids will be like, yeah, I feel that way too. Have you felt that way? Yeah. And they start to see they're not so different, even if their culture is different, even if their friend group is different. They're not so different.
Wow. That's that's much more than a tactic. That is an eye-opening exercise and the first thing I took away was the amount of white space is astronomically bigger than that black dot. It's like so much bigger. And the same thing, we see negative comments on our social feeds. You might see 100, positive comments. You get one negative, and that's all we focus on.
Right.
Really, really interesting stuff, Erin. I'd like to just tap back into the arts a little bit for a second. Do you experience, because I know you said you were a dance teacher, am I correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So when you were working with as a dance teacher, I don't know necessarily if your lens was specifically helping them with their mental health because you were teaching them how to dance.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that obviously things like that has come up, whether it may be stage fright, whether it may be self-worth, whatever. What are, if any, some of the challenges that performing arts students are facing that other high school students probably will never face?
Well, first, Kevin, I did not know I was helping my students with their mental health when I first started teaching. When I first started teaching, I was 24 years old. And I'm like, oh, they got attitude. Oh, they don't think they're good enough. I was like, oh, we're gonna have to talk. We're gonna have to unpack. So I didn't know that this was the building block for the work I do now. It was just instinct. Like, I was like, if I want them to buy into this program, we're gonna have to crack the egg open and get to the person inside. So that's all I knew. But what different challenges do they face? I feel like we touched on it in the beginning. It's our work is very very outward
between what we were dealing with.
Right. So it's like we're on display. And that
Mm-hmm.
could even happen if you're a writer or even an artist, right? A fine or graphic artist, because you're putting your work in the world. So I think that could be different challenges that artists face as students rather than the general population. And I also think a challenge that I find with all kids, but definitely with artists, is speaking, talking about what is going on inside,
Mm-hmm.
because it's so easy to process what you're feeling through your art. So I remember one thing I would do with my students, and they would hate me, but they got good at it, is like, no, like, because I liked a lot of composition. We did a lot of compositional work. And if they did a work, they would have to stand up in front of the class and present it and say, this is what you're going to see, blah, blah, blah. Everything that I did, I tried to incorporate them expressing themselves verbally too. And that helped. But I think that's a challenge that kids face. Like, how do they express themselves verbally as well as in their art?
Wow. Wow. Yeah, I think there's all. I'm so thankful for your time, Erin. Before we wrap up, I want to just see if we can touch on one thing here because, and this is a hard question because it's, from someone who has an education background, education experience, and someone now who is in the speaking world and not in formal education, but still working with teens in a completely different facet. I think you and I and many other people that I have on this podcast have those very interesting dynamics. So I always ask this question, or I always like to try to ask this question, is if you have any type of, call it feedback, call it ideas, resources for educators who are in the trenches, 7 to 2, Monday through Friday, like, well, that's the when kids are there.
Yeah, I get it.
And like something that can help them spot some students who are possibly dealing with some internal struggles that are hard to see because they are so busy, because they are focused on keeping just classroom management at bay, focusing on making sure all the grades are in by the end of the quarter, focusing on all these things. And sometimes, some of the challenges go unseen because guess what? They're not psychologists. They weren't paid to be a social worker. That's not necessarily their job, yet they have sometimes the greatest relationship with these students. So do you have any type of advice for teachers that are maybe to be able to spot these things and students struggling with their mental health?
Yeah, I don't know if it's advice, but I have a perspective that I want to offer.
Please.
I think everyone struggles with their mental health. So you don't need a mental illness to struggle with your mental health. So I think it's more about like, is the student struggling with their mental health today? Than at all. And then for me, it's like, I believe in educators are busy. Trust me, I know, but shifting your class culture to support it all the time. So for example, and I have a free resource that they could download off my website. It's
awesome.
Becoming a Gratitude Ninja, a workshop for grades 6 through 12, but it's how this is on my heart. Like, how do you shift your culture to always touch on things that are going to help them improve their mental health? And trust me, I know you might be a math teacher, a science teacher. You have that curriculum, those tests you got to get ready for. It's very different from a dance or a music teacher. We didn't have those kind of restraints. I didn't at least have those restraints on myself. But it's like, how can you take 10 to 15 minutes to start building in these conversations, these activities, these exercises? So it's not necessarily that you have to pinpoint a student with a mental health issue. You make the conversation and the practice of caring for our mental health as a part of your class culture. And that's what my firm belief is. And it's like, and I know it's not easy, and I know you're limited on time, but life has changed. The world has changed. And I believe that we make time for what we want to, and it takes time to adjust, but you can absolutely do it. So I have that free resource. It's cool because it's a video. It's like, I think it's 11 minutes. You could pop it on. Your students can watch it. It's about gratitude, and it helps them build a gratitude practice and have a perspective shift. And it comes with a workbook, and it's totally free. You just go to my website, erinpompa.com, and you're going to see it at the top banner. And just download it and use it in your class. And then you can revisit it for like a whole unit and just have gratitude as the theme for your unit, and then move on to something else.
If that's not the best way to end the podcast, I can't think of another one. Erin, I will definitely link that in the show notes for everybody. You are awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Any last words or any last parting things you'd like to say to all the educators and or administrators out there?
Well, I want to say something to you, Kevin. I want to thank you for having me on. Anytime I get to share my message with like-minded people, I feel like it's a gift. I love how our stories align. And we're so similar. So thank you. And I think that what you're creating for the community is important. And yeah, book Kevin, y'all. Book me. That's what I got to say.
That's it. There we go. There we go. All right. Awesome. Erin, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So that's it. I really hope you enjoyed my conversation with Erin today. I sure did. What a cool and down-to-earth person she is, and look forward to actually working with her in a gig later this year. So super pumped. I would highly suggest that you go ahead and visit her website and download the Gratitude Ninja Workshop. It's right at the top. I think it's a pretty cool resource that you can definitely take and use how you see fit. However you need to use it in your classroom, or whether it be a full focal point of your lessons or maybe just some inspiration for ideas for you. But whatever it is, Erin is definitely a resource that I would not let pass by. If you like today's episode, then let me know by hitting like, hitting subscribe, and hitting the bell notification to be notified every time I release a new video. And I want to hear from you. Let me know what your favorite part of today's conversation was, and especially if you have had any type of issues when it comes to whether we're going to say anxiety, so we don't have to necessarily mental health, but any type of anxiety when it comes to either a stage performance, maybe even something as some small little public speaking thing, because I think we've all kind of experienced that. I like to hear that experience down in the comments below and see if any of these conversations that we had today can bring some new light and some new perspective onto your story of stage fright or anxiety / public speaking issues. Thank you so much. If you like today's episode, then you're probably also going to like this one right over here.